Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I am Ryan Wormley, joined, as I have been for like 4 or 5 shows in a row, by Pat Fitzmaurice. Fitz, it's great to see you at Fitz_FF on Twitter. But I also want to introduce our other guest today because while I have worked with her for like coming up on 2 years now behind the scenes, I have not actually been on camera with her yet. It's Tera Roberts from, as I asked her how I should introduce her, she said Fantasy Pros and several other fantasy sites. There's literally too many to name. You can find her almost anywhere. She does great work with all the other places. I think she does her best work with Fantasy Pros, but I'm biased. She's at It's Tera Time on Twitter. Tera, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm super excited for this show with you.
It's going to be a fun one. I am Ryan Wormley, at Ryan Wormley on Twitter. We will jump right in, and we're talking about Dynasty Rookie Draft lottery picks. Now, I know we're here in late June. A lot of rookie drafts do happen in May, but some of them take longer. Some of them are still going on. Sometimes you can use this information in your Dynasty startup drafts. You can consider this to be maybe guys that went later in drafts earlier this year that you want to target in a trade. There's still a lot of valuable information here, and we're going to partially base this off of an article that Tera actually wrote for the site recently about Dynasty Rookie Draft lottery picks. You can check that out at FantasyPros.com. We've also got our Dynasty Rookie Superflex rankings on there. So you can go on the site, check out all that. You can see what the various analysts have. You can see the expert consensus, all that good stuff, all available at FantasyPros.com. But we will jump right in. We're going to hit every position here. We're going to start with wide receivers. And Fitz, I want to start with you. What wide receiver are you looking at? And by the way, I should say, these are guys that are typically going according to ADP after pick 24. So this is in your third round or later of Superflex Dynasty rookie drafts. So Fitz, start us off here at wide receiver.
All right, I will bring up Kayshon Boutte of the New England Patriots. And this guy just had a really fascinating college career. When he was a freshman at LSU, he finished his season with 3 straight 100-yard games, the last of which was actually a 14-catch, 308-yard game against Ole Miss, and the other 200-yard games were against Alabama and Florida. So this guy was, as an 18-year-old freshman in the SEC, which, you know, Ryan, even as a Big Ten fan, I have to admit is the best football conference in the country. He was doing it against high-level competition at an early age. Then as a sophomore, 9 touchdowns in 6 games, and he was looking like a future first-rounder. Hurt his ankle, broke his ankle trying to make a circus catch against Kentucky. So that ended his season prematurely. And then he came back in 2022 and just like wasn't the same guy. I don't know if it was the lingering effects of the ankle injury. 48 catches, 538 yards, only 2 touchdowns in 11 games. And Boutte apparently was not on the same page, it seemed like, with Brian Kelly, the LSU head coach. Now, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Brian Kelly for reasons I won't get into here. So I guess I don't really downgrade Boutte at all for, you know, the rap he's got for maybe having an attitude problem, because, you know, maybe it's just something between him and Kelly. But if you would have told me in the fall of 2021, when I was watching this guy just rip it up in Baton Rouge, that he would not be a first or second round draft pick when he entered the draft, that he would fall to the 6th round, I would not have believed you at all. Good route runner, really outstanding after the catch. There's no guarantee he even makes the Patriots roster as a 6th round pick, and his chances to make the team could even take a hit if they sign DeAndre Hopkins. Reportedly, the Patriots have made Hopkins an offer, as have the Titans. So if he does wind up in New England, that's not a great thing for Boutte's future, but I'm fascinated by this guy's talent and think he has a chance to surprise if he does, in fact, make the roster.
Yeah, it's so interesting with Boutte because he is, unless I'm forgetting an obvious name, he's probably the single guy who lost the most draft stock this last season. Again, unless I'm forgetting an obvious name here. I mean, he was considered by many people to be right up there with JSN as wide receiver 1 in this class when we were sitting here a year ago. If he makes the roster, if he actually is a part to whatever degree in this New England Patriots offense, what kind of role do you see him having in the NFL? Because I agree, the talent is immense, but I'm really curious how NFL teams would choose to use him, especially a team like the Patriots, where we don't entirely know what the offense is going to look like now that they have an actual offensive coordinator running things and calling plays there this year. What do you make of what his role could be in sort of a best case scenario in the NFL?
I mean, best case, I think, is just for him to have a spot on the field in 4 wide receiver rotations. Like, I don't unless he really stuns us, he's probably not going to be on the field right away for 3 receiver rotations. But I think he does have some inside-outside versatility. I think he could line up in the slot or outside. So I don't know, maybe if there is a spate of injuries with the Patriots in training camp in the preseason, maybe that helps get him on the field more often. But I think in year one, we just want to see the guy play.
Tara, give me your first wide receiver here.
So my first wide receiver is going to be Tank Dell, who is a little bit opposite than Kayshon Boutte because Kayshon has all the measurables and all of these statistics that we saw in that first year look very promising. And on the opposite end, Tank Dell, not so high on the measurables. He is a little bit smaller, very small, 5'8", 165, which typically doesn't translate to the NFL. So he's kind of got a very different problem than Kayshon Boutte for him to break out into the NFL. But at this point, I pretty much love any young Houston receiver as a late round target in redraft, but especially buy low options in Dynasty as well. Very pro Nico Collins, pro John Mechie, and very much so pro Tank Dell in Dynasty. And your lottery ticket status really starts when your new rookie quarterback immediately comes in during the draft and says that he wants the team to go out and get you, and the team does. That's a massive amount of confidence from the organization and from CJ Stroud. And a lot of times, that connection with the quarterback immediately, that's the biggest hurdle for rookies earning that trust. And if he's already got it, that speaks volume because, again, this wide receiving room, wide open. I love these guys. I love John Mechie, but he is technically entering his first season of play after missing his rookie season. Nico Collins, again, 2 seasons of play, and highest finish that he's had is wide receiver 77. Robert Woods, veteran presence, but at 31, again, we saw him in Tennessee. The upside is kind of limited. He's a very stable guy, but he's not somebody who's really going to pop off the page for us. We've got a brand new coaching staff. There's no real loyalty here at wide receiver 1. So if Tank Dell can get in there and, turn some heads, I can see where he could make this transition to being a prominent part of the Houston Texans offense. When we're looking at, rookie wide receivers, we're looking at guys who have all of the skill sets that transition to the next level. Your ability to run strong routes. You've got to have reliable hands. For a small guy, you don't have to be the fastest in the world, but we do need you to be quick and dynamic. And Tank Dell has all of those things wrapped in one fantastic tiny package. His college production, very strong as well. Over at the 100 receptions, over 1,400 yards, final season at Houston. So again, the only thing that he has to overcome is just the size issue. We're seeing the league go smaller and smaller, and at some point there is going to be an outlier guy that comes in and makes an impact, and there's no reason that Tank Dell can't be that person.
Scale of 1 to 10, how much are you concerned about the size?
Like a 6.
Okay.
Like a 6. I mean, we saw Rondale Moore kind of pop up last year, and we've seen these guys that are popping up and making production. The problem is they're not really staying healthy. We saw Wan'Dale Robinson last year. Teams are finding ways to work them in. It's just, can you at that size be able to compete and stay on the field? And, hey, his name is Tank. Maybe he has that, innate advantage to be able to make that transition into the NFL that the other guys haven't been able to make that jump yet.
I'm glad you mentioned that Stroud actually went out and said he wanted to draft the guy, although nobody is going to get this reference. I was burned by that as a Ravens fan many years ago when Joe Flacco went out and insisted that they drafted Tandon Doss to be his new X receiver, and then Tandon Doss did literally nothing in the NFL, so that was a bummer. As a Ravens fan, Fitz, give me your next receiver.
It is Michael Wilson of the Cardinals. And I think a lot of people were surprised. It was pretty eye-opening when the Cardinals took Michael Wilson on day 2 of the NFL draft. He snuck in as a late 3rd rounder. And the guy has not played more than 6 college games in a season since 2019 at Stanford. He was there for 5 years, kept getting hurt. He missed the second half of the 2022 season, and I don't think they've actually reported what the injury was, which is a little concerning. So Wilson is this high effort, high energy player, and he's a big receiver, 6'2", 210 pounds, which is kind of a good thing for the Cardinals since that is a team laden with smaller receivers, Marquise Brown, Rondale Moore, who Tara just mentioned, and Greg Dortch. So would be nice, give the Cardinals a a different dimension with a bigger possession receiver. And I think Wilson is going to get his chances because we know the Cardinals are in sort of a rebuild mode. They have every incentive to see what they've got with their young players going forward. So the fact that Wilson was a third-round pick, even with his injury history, suggests the Cardinals were pretty intrigued by his potential.
You got through, unless I missed it, I think you got through that whole section without mentioning DeAndre Hopkins' name, which obviously opens up a lot of targets in this offense. And clearly, I'm not drawing a comparison between Michael Wilson and DeAndre Hopkins just in terms of talent and impact. But you mentioned it's a lot of small receivers on this roster. Could Wilson at least fit into that Hopkins role that's now been vacated, even if not, again, competing at the same level?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he was able to get, he's not going to get a DeAndre Hopkins like 28% target share or anything, but, maybe he could sneak into the upper teens as a rookie, which would be pretty impressive. So yeah, like there is a role to be had here for him if he can stay healthy and prove himself in training camp.
Of course, since we're talking about Dynasty lottery picks today, I have to remind everybody to check out the FantasyPros Dynasty Football podcast, but only if you're serious about building a championship in your Dynasty League. Hosts Scott Bogman and Pat Fitzmaurice, who of course is with us today, offer comprehensive analysis on this year's rookie class, their Dynasty rankings, top trade targets, and more to help you build a winner that lasts. After this show, search for the FantasyPros Dynasty Football podcast in your podcast app to start listening. Don't just play for this year, build your dynasty. And Pat, since you're actually on this show, tell us about what you guys are up to on the feed.
Hey, well, thanks for the pitch here, Ryan. So we are in the midst of a positional ranking series where we go through one position per episode and discuss basically a breakdown how our rankings compare, and then we sort of pinpoint the areas of disagreement and sort of state our cases. And we had a great guest last week. We had Kevin Coleman of Football Guys, winner of the Tags Rising Star Award, talking with us about quarterbacks. And, we all sort of got on the couch and talked about, we're all Trey Lance truthers. So we had a big Trey Lance discussion. That was kind of interesting since he's quite the polarizing figure. And this week we're going to be getting into the wide receivers with Alfredo Brown of Football Guys. So check it out. It's been a pretty interesting series. Hopefully people like it.
Very Kevin Coleman heavy week last week on the podcast feeds because you and I podcast with him on this show, and then you got to talk with him on the Dynasty feed as well. Always a great guest. Tara, your next wide receiver that you want to talk about, I will just spoil for you. It's Puka Nacua, and I bring it up to say that I very much wish Debro was on this show as well because I have not met anybody who loves Puka Nacua as much as Debro does, but obviously you are big on him as well.
I am. I will try to live up to the Debro hype on Puka Nacua. I feel like the hype is kind of like just swelling down on him, really, because he used to be like, a couple months ago, like this nice little secret. And now no longer a secret. You can still get him in like early round four of Dynasty rookie drafts. But people are going up and get him because they know he's a fantastic sleeper option. Unlike Tank Dell that I talked about, Nacua has size. He is he's 6'2", over 200 pounds, strong perimeter receiver, which is very needed within the Rams offense. He's physical, athletic, strong ball skills, got everything except maybe he needs to develop his routes a little bit more. But we can work with that. That's okay. Especially when we're talking in Dynasty. And there's another reason beyond the talent where Nacua is really being pushed up and why I'm very bullish on him. Beyond Cooper Kupp and Tyler Higbee, there is genuinely no strong third receiving option in this Rams offense. And we know that more than likely it's not going to come from the running back position just because of how we've seen Cam Akers utilized within the receiving game very minimally in the past. So it's wide open for somebody to kind of step up and make an impact immediately. Van Jefferson, favorite for that third option, but he's never really finished higher than a low-end wide receiver 3. And that just kind of might be his ceiling, unfortunately. We've got Ben Skoranek, not really capable of being a big producer. We've also got Tutu Atwell of the smaller variety, and he hasn't really shown anything other than being the occasional deep threat. So when we're looking at Nacua and where he could slot into that offense, I think he's got all of the capabilities to be able to make an immediate impact and see the field very quickly and fit a specific role within that Rams offense.
Tara, just quickly on a follow-up, do you worry at all about the future of both the quarterback position in LA and maybe even head coach. I mean, there have been rumors about McVay being willing to walk away here after winning the Super Bowl. It seemed like losing really wore on him last year. If this is another down year and Stafford's injured and they do kind of an offensive reset here, just do you worry about the state of that offense long term for Nacua?
I try to be not biased on this one because I have a couple of Matt Stafford dynasty shares and we're trying to win now on it before the rug gets pulled out underneath us. But my gut tells me that if they had actually been competitive last year and that if things were stable within the offense and the offensive line wasn't a complete disaster, that might have been something that he could have come back from towards the end of the year. And I think they had that kind of situation with several guys. Aaron Donald was one, and maybe they just kind of saw the writing on the wall, and maybe that just transitioned into the off season and the narrative around several players and whether or not they would make a return and be on the edge of retiring. So I'm kind of teetering towards the side that it might have been, it's a little bit real, but a little bit off-season fodder based off of what happened throughout the season. And by all accounts, Stafford seems to have recovered, coming back healthy. And unless another injury issue pops up, which could always happen, especially with these older quarterbacks, I feel comfortable with Matt Stafford being able to make it through the season.
We've got a couple of Packers rookie tight ends to talk about here in the tight end section. So, Tara, I will stick with you to talk a little bit about Luke Musgrave.
Luke Musgrave. I like him because I feel like he is the perfect definition of a draft lottery ticket because we have literally no actual track record of him having what it takes in terms of statistics for him to be an NFL caliber starting tight end. No offense to him at all. The statistics, they just aren't there. They're not to the level of a guy like Michael Mayer, but the measurables are. And sometimes you do have to take a chance on that, and the Packers did. We've got a guy that is 6'6", 250, very athletic, and although the stats, again, they aren't huge, he has shown solid route running, good hands, versatility, and those are things that should transition very well into the NFL, and he pretty much has immediately locked down that tight end one role. And, what I love to see and what I read about him is that I feel like he's a guy that could serve as a strong red zone threat. And a lot of times we look at this Packers offense and how it was with Aaron Rodgers, and we say it's Aaron Rodgers' preferences, but we got to also remember this is Matt LaFleur's offense. And a lot of that can be attributed to him and his preferences as well. The usage of the tight end position was a very key red zone target. We saw in 2020 when Robert Tonyan had that 11 touchdown season on just 59 targets. The usage can be there in that offense. And it's an offense where these receivers, they've got size. Christian Watson, 6'5", Romeo Doubs, he's not short, over 6'6", but none of them are really that big body receiving type like an AJ Brown. So they need a tight end that can go in and fit that role. And I feel like Musgrave can be that. I love all the Packers receiving options because I am a little bit higher on Jordan Love being able to come in competently. I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback ever, but be competent in the Packers offense. So I think we got to look at these first year guys and young guys for the Packers and buy into them a little bit more. We can't be really wary of these pass catchers because it's not really the typical situation where a new young quarterback is going to throw them off.
So, Fitz, you picked Tucker Kraft here for this tight end section. Is that because Tara got Musgrave first, or do you actually like Kraft better than Musgrave in that offense?
Well, yeah, this is really an interesting spot with Tara, my fellow Packers fan, and here we are dueling over the rookie tight ends the Packers drafted. No, I mean, it's not necessarily that. And look, if I was forced to put a bet down on one of these two having the better fantasy production in year one and beyond, I probably would bet on Musgrave simply because of the higher draft capital. But I think the gap is slimmer than what we have seen in fantasy rookie drafts. And it seems like, I've seen Musgrave go as early as the second round in some of these drafts, often early third, and Kraft falls into the fourth round. I just don't think the gap should be quite that big. Now, FantasyPros, college football, and draft analyst Thor Nystrom actually had Kraft ranked one spot ahead of Musgrave in his pre-draft tight end rankings. Now, Kraft did play at South Dakota State, so there is going to be a big adjustment for him to the level of competition in the NFL. But terrific athlete. I mean, Kraft did all the tests at the combine and was 73rd percentile or higher in all of them. And as Thor notes, he is really quick off the snap. That's where he is going to win in the NFL. That is his thing. So Yeah, I mean, the attractive thing about him is the price, as I mentioned before. Like he falls in drafts, in redraft leagues, he's probably not even going to be a draft consideration in all but the deepest of leagues. Um, yeah, the thing is the level of competition. That's the thing he has to hurdle. Whereas Musgrave at least played against Pac-12 competition. But yeah, I just do not think the gap should be quite as high as it is. And the other thing, I mean, Kraft's kind of a bad blocker. So if they're going to put him on the field, it's not going to be for his blocking. It's going to be for his pass catching. So maybe he's like the designated pass catcher out of these two rookies. We'll see. It's going to be really interesting to see how these guys develop in training camp in the preseason.
So you guys heard it here. The official stance of this show is draft Packers rookie tight ends. If the listeners want even more potential rookie lottery picks for their dynasty teams, or if you're looking for strategies to help you build your squad, then you'll love the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Draft Kit at fantasypros.com/dynasty. It's stacked with dynasty rookie and startup rankings, trade targets, and deep diving rookie profiles. If you're a premium subscriber, you'll get access to exclusive strategy articles along with the best our Discord community has to offer, including direct interaction with our analysts through AMAs and stages. Start winning now at fantasypros.com/dynasty. Guys, let's move to the running backs here. It's a position where you tend to find a lot of lottery picks because for whatever reason, situations change, guys get opportunities. It's a position where you kind of come in at your most talented and sort of lose athleticism basically from your rookie year on. It's a place where if you have an opportunity, you can make an impact early. So Fitz, give me your running back lottery ticket you're targeting.
It's Dwayne McBride. And although he was only a 7th-round pick, he has got abundant opportunity in Minnesota, where they have jettisoned Dalvin Cook, leaving a pretty thin and easily navigable running back depth chart here. And McBride is sort of I think his skill set will play well here. They've got a couple of faster sort of slasher or third down back types behind Alexander Madison with Ty Chandler and Kene Nwangwu. But McBride is really a thumper. Like he is an early down guy who could possibly be a candidate for goal line and short yardage work. And he was wildly productive at UAB. He had over 3,000 rushing yards and 32 touchdown runs in his last 2 college seasons, including 1,713 rushing yards and 19 touchdown runs last fall. McBride's just a powerful runner. And there's an opportunity for him to be sort of the Vikings version of what Jamal Williams for the Lions was for the Lions last year, which obviously was very lucrative from a fantasy standpoint. So McBride's going to get his shot even as a 7th rounder. And, if he can seize on the opportunity, he's going to be a coveted guy in fantasy drafts this year.
Yeah, I think he's a really exciting person for me, especially just because Madison, for as much as we've seen the talent when Dalvin Cook has been out, we haven't seen him take on a full workload over the course of a 17-game season yet. So there's room here where if he maybe struggles to hold up to that kind of standard that we've expected from him in small doses, maybe he gets injured. Obviously, we would never hope for that, but it seems like there's a pretty clear path. And like you mentioned, McBride has sort of separated himself stylistically from the rest of that depth chart. So it seems like there's, maybe 1 or 2 moves away from he could be a really fairly impactful guy for you as a late round pick, even in redraft beyond just dynasty. I think going into this year. Tara, who's your first running back you're looking at?
Mine is it's Chase Brown, and this is going to come off very anti-Joe Mixon, and I'm not going to lie, it's mainly anti-Joe Mixon. But I really think that Chase Brown, we've seen Isiah Pacheco, Tyler Algier make those late round immediate impacts, and I feel like Chase Brown could be that guy this year. I am clutching my dynasty shares of him because even ignoring the obvious of Joe Mixon being a cut candidate, let's put that aside and say he is a Bengal. I still think there's a way for Chase Brown to make an immediate impact this season. Mixon averaged 58.1 yards per game. That's not very good. 3.9 yards per carry. That is horribly efficient. And that's not going to cut him in an offense that's trying to make the Super Bowl. He is a big weak spot within the offense if he starts to show those same signs next year that maybe he lost a step. There's been too much smoke around his role within the Bengals to think that they're, aggressively tied to him. I think the leash is very short. And if Brown shows the tiniest bit of pop, he'll earn snaps. And we've seen that he, has been a high production guy in college, minimum of 5 yards per carry every single year. He's got multiple years of showing this level of volume, the high level of performance, over 1,600 yards, strong in receptions as well. He's a guy that could really outshine Mixon, quite frankly. So he could even have a kind of maybe standalone Samaje Perine-ish role because of receiving upside. So I really like Chase Brown as somebody who I really can make a year one impact.
What's your take on Brown's just game in general? Because you're right, he was uber productive in the Big Ten at Illinois, and then we got into draft season this spring, and I feel like I heard a lot of draft nicks that I really respect sort of talk about him a little lesser than you would think compared to the stats. Like, oh, he was really productive, but we don't see that translating to the NFL. How do you see him translating to the NFL? And again, how do you square sort of the crazy production numbers we saw versus the fact that he fell to the 5th round and maybe the NFL doesn't view his talent on quite that level?
He might not be very special, unfortunately. He's 3 down back capabilities. He can obviously produce, but you look at this draft and you see the guys that, got pushed up and targeted, and they all have some kind of very dynamic, explosive nature to that. And I can see where he kind of falls beyond that. So we're looking at guys like obviously Bijan, Gibbs, Devin A-Chain really popped up. Even Deuce Vaughn got a little play. So it's possible that these guys that can the NFL is just teetering more towards guys that can be those dynamic impact players. And they just felt like Brown really didn't stand out in any area. But the good news is that can make you a very good handcuff as a guy that can kind of step in and be a stable portion of an offense. So that's where I think his role is. You got to maybe be a little bit careful in terms of maybe he gets Tyler Algiered next season if he does produce well this season. But again, I think the impact can really be there year one.
Yeah, Fitz, quickly before we get to your running back, I want to ask you the same question just because obviously you're a Big Ten guy. You've watched a lot of everybody in the Big Ten, including, Chase Brown at Illinois. So what do you make of his game translating to the NFL, even opportunity aside, just as an NFL running back?
Yeah, so he had kind of a bad Senior Bowl week, reportedly, but then I think running a 4.4 at the combine really helped him. And man, when he was at Illinois this past year, like Brett Bielema, the Illinois head coach, and the former Wisconsin head coach. I mean, I know how hard he worked his running backs at Wisconsin. Chase Brown averaged over 27 carries a game for Illinois. Like, that's the attractive thing. If they decided to release Mixon, or if Mixon were to get hurt, they've got a guy who could step in and handle a mammoth workload and hold up, which Chase Brown did. I mean, like, he just they would feed him, and it seemed like at some games he would just get stronger as the game went on. So that has to be really appealing. I don't know if he's got any special traits or not, but someone who can handle that sort of load. Like, I'm really intrigued by him too, and I've landed him in a few rookie drafts myself.
And Fitz, the running back you're going to talk about here is Sean Tucker from Syracuse, another guy who was pretty productive here in college. And then again, it kind of seemed like some of the draft analyst guys were saying it might not translate as well to the NFL. So I guess it's sort of a similar question to Chase Brown. What do you make of Sean Tucker here, and why is he one of your lottery picks?
Yeah, very productive in college, Ryan, running for 1,496 yards and 12 touchdowns as a sophomore at Syracuse, and then having another 1,000-yard season as a junior last year with 11 touchdowns and 36 receptions last year too. So he can catch passes. He's not really a third down back. But yeah, he went undrafted. So we've got a UDFA here, but maybe that was less about his college production and his athletic profile, and more about some medical red flags he had. Like, he reportedly had some heart issue that may have scared some teams off. But he landed with the Buccaneers, and that was a pretty good landing spot for an undrafted free agent because it's Rachaad White and a very thin depth chart after that. So maybe Tucker could work his way into a meaningful role here with a good camp and a good preseason. And, he ran a 4.4 at the combine. He did 29 reps on the bench press, and I know, bench press for a running back doesn't mean much, but that's still pretty impressive. An intriguing guy, and he's going to get an opportunity here, even though he went undrafted. And if he makes the most of it, I could see him in the rotation for the Bucs this year.
Tara, give me our last running back here.
Last running back is Eric Gray. Not somebody who was typically on my top 10 list during the offseason at running back. But again, this is more of an opportunity pick here that I see we're, kind of seeing a trend here. Personally, I do think that Saquon will play. And I'm kind of on his side in terms of the contract negotiations and whatnot, completely understandable. Maybe he only sits a portion of the season, but if he sits anytime, I think Eric Gray could be a big winner. And he's somebody who you don't even have to draft. You can go up and pick him off of waivers right now. Here's the thing, again, this is Saquon. Eric Gray is not going to produce as Saquon. They're two completely different players, two completely different sized players. They can't really be utilized the same way. But again, we've got another guy who has a lot of proven workload in production in college. He had over 200 carries his senior year, over 1,300 yards, averaged over 6 yards per carry. So again, we see this pattern. He's no stranger to a lead back role. So if he's asked to step in, and he also has that receiving upside as well, I can see where he can make an impact in any absence from Saquon Barkley. So I like this as a legitimate lottery ticket if something were to happen with Saquon.
We're going to wrap up with one quarterback each. And the quarterback is an interesting spot, Fitz, where, most of the guys that you're going to have real interest in that are going to have a chance to start relatively early in their careers are not going to be lottery picks, especially in a super flex draft. They're going in the first round, maybe the second in a situation like Will Levis where he fell in the NFL draft. But those guys that have a shot are not going to be available here in the third round and beyond by and large. So how do you go about picking out a quarterback lottery ticket, and who is the guy that you want to talk about?
Dart throws, Ryan. Absolute dart throws here. Possible opportunity is one thing. And then, for me, it's sort of the system they played in college and the skill set they showed and how translatable it might be to the NFL. So, and really that's the case here. It's not the fact that I actually watched this guy play in high school, since he played for the high school my kids are now attending, and since he grew up in the town next door to the one I live in. It's Aiden O'Connell of the Raiders. And so O'Connell's kind of a classic drop back passer, not real mobile, but I think his translation to the NFL might be a little bit easier than it will be for some other quarterbacks because he did play in a pro style system at Purdue and because he's an anticipatory thrower and not a guy who needs to see his receiver break open before he's ready to release the ball. So I think that's going to help him. And then we've got the Jimmy Garoppolo situation where he had surgery on the foot injury that ended his 2022 season, didn't take part in OTAs. I mean, he's probably going to be fine come week one, but you never know. And if it's not Jimmy Garoppolo, the only other quarterback on the roster right now for the Raiders is Brian Hoyer, who's like 57 or something. So maybe O'Connell gets a shot at some point early in the year.
Yeah, it makes sense if you're going to take a dart throw on a quarterback, pick one where the long-term guy is probably not in place. I mean, your mileage may vary on Jimmy G, but, it doesn't appear like the quarterback of the future is in that room right now. So take a shot maybe on this rookie who was somewhat productive, in a major conference as being that guy. Tara, who's your quarterback?
I'm with Pat. We're looking for guys that have an opportunity and have skills that can translate. And that for me is Clayton Tune. I have more shares of him than I ever thought I would have in Dynasty. But unfortunately, there's a good chance that Kyler Murray, he won't play a decent portion of the season. Colt McCoy is also recovering from injuries. And Clayton Tune has size. He has strong college production, decent mobility. Obviously, he's not going to be able to operate like Kyler, but we're going to see a new offense anyway. So I'm not sure how much, that's a big of an issue. And the big thing for me is we're talking about a guy who was a very accurate quarterback, averaged 67% completion rating last year, 68 before. So he's very proven and very stable in that way. What more can you ask for in a backup quarterback that has to step in? Wish he had a bigger arm, wish there was more of that. But I think he's someone that can kind of step in there and, could have a little Brock Purdy situation if the opportunity really calls for him.
Tara, I'm very used to hearing all of your analysis in these 30-second bites on TikTok. So it's been very fun to hear you actually get to expand a little bit more and dive deeper into your analysis here. Everybody, please check out the Fantasy Pros TikTok page where you can find Tara on there. We often put her stuff on Instagram Reels as well. So she's all over the Fantasy Pros social media side of things. And be sure to check out Pat on the Dynasty podcast as well, where they dive into this stuff pretty much all year long outside of when they get too busy during the regular season. So be sure to check them out everywhere you can find them. across all the platforms. For Tara and Pat, I am Ryan Wormley. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.